the pandemic began, nursing homes and assisted living facilities have largely banned families and caregivers from visiting their loved ones. With these restrictions being lifted, I've asked Tammy Milliner with Strive at Fern Park to explain these new protocols and how facilities are keeping residents safe. Tammy, welcome to Active Lifestyles. And gosh, I can't think of a more timely subject, because as things are reopening and now we maybe have that possibility of seeing our loved one who's in an assisted living facility. You know, first of all, we want to know, well, who makes all these decisions about what reopens and all the protocols?
So the governor is who makes the decision, but he has AHCA doing all of the implementation for it.
Okay, and who is AHCA?
The Agency for Healthcare Administration. So they're the ones that kind of govern. It's the state governing. They come and check in the facilities, make sure everything's good, and they do all of the testing or anything like that if it needs to be done and assist with that.
Now, we often hear on the news, we'll hear about emergency orders that are being lifted or being implemented. So how does that come into play?
So the latest order, the previous one just had essential caregivers. So now they've changed from essential caregivers. You can also have compassionate caregivers, and there's going to be limited visitation, so general visitation. So that looks a little different for everyone, but they can be indoors, they can be outdoors. It just depends on each facility and what their protocol is and what comfort they feel with the guidelines.
Okay, that's what I really wanted to clarify, because each facility, may get this directive from the governor. They may get, some sort of governmental information, but is it mandatory that they follow those guidelines, or how does that all come into play?
Yes, for the visitation, they have to follow it. How each person follows it is what changes. So as long as everyone's following the guideline, they can continue to do that. But some people choose, if they feel that they can safely do indoors, then they can do indoor visitation. It just has to be private for each resident to be able to have that visitation. Outdoors, some people still just feel comfortable with the outdoor visitation, but it's kind of we offer both. We have an opportunity where you can do it outside, or we have indoors, but that's just what we've implemented for our building.
Okay, and so now I have a loved one in one of these facilities. How do I find out, that it's okay to come visit, and do I have to wear a mask? Is there going to be a temperature check? What are the protocols for the caregiver coming to the facility?
Absolutely. We communicate really well with our families and anyone that would visit. So they do have to still be screened. They have to have their temperatures taken. They have to do a written screening when they come in that asks if they've had any symptoms or anything like that. So they do have to have a mask as well. All of those things are things that are still being implemented, and making sure that they're still socially distancing and using hand hygiene, making sure all of those things are still being done.
And now at the facility, I'm just going to role play this. I have a mom, a dad, a spouse who's in that facility. I come to the door, and what happens from there?
So usually it's scheduled. It's required that they do schedule with us so that we can make sure that we have enough staff, that we have everything that we have in place to make sure that we can appropriately take them. They are supposed to schedule a time, and then we expect them, and then they have to do their screening upon entry, and then we put them in the area that their loved one's going to be, but they can only have up to 2 visitors on that visitation. So they are allowed to have more people as a whole, but at any given time they can only have 2 visitors.
Now, does it have to be an actual family member? Could it be, a neighbor, a friend?
They can designate up to 5 people for the general visitation. For the essential caregivers and compassionate caregivers, they can designate 2 of each of those, and then 5 for the general visitation.
Now here comes the problem. I come there, and for some reason I'm denied entry. Maybe temperature or whatever the situation may be. What kind of appeal process can I have?
I don't really know if it's so much an appeal process. I mean, there are stuff in place to make sure that we are keeping our residents safe. So if they have a temperature, it's one of those that we would have to go further into that, see why they have a temperature. If it's on the border, figure out what we can do about that. If they don't meet the screening questions, that's something that they can't really appeal. If someone's traveled outside the country for any reason, if they've been on a cruise, those are things that are still in place even though the order has changed. Other than that, I mean, age is also something that we have had a little bit of questions for. The order does not allow anyone under 18 years of age to come in, and people want to bring their grandkids and they want to do all of
sure, I
that.
bet.
So it's been a little bit hard because we obviously want them to be able to see them. So we figure out outside to where they're not having that contact that we can do that. But as far as the indoor visitation, they are not allowed to come in for indoor visitation.
Right, because I'm sure you've seen the pictures of, maybe at a window, and here's grandma or grandpa, and the grandchildren are outside,
Yes.
seeing
And we've had
them.
people do that, and they bring them signs, and they do really nice things. But unfortunately, sometimes unfortunately, this order does not allow them in the building at this time. Hopefully, that'll change in the future.
But
once we have
things are getting better.
They
I'm going to
are.
quickly flip it to the other side.
Sure.
For the resident, what kind of protocol do they have to meet to see their loved ones?
They cannot be in quarantine. So quarantine, obviously, for most people, they know that that's a 14-day period where they have to stay in their rooms and not have contact with anybody else if they've been exposed, if they're showing symptoms, or if they tested positive. As long as we are off of that quarantine and they have everything else in place, they are allowed to come out. We do require that not only the family member wear a mask during any visitation, but that the resident also wear a mask. They are also checked multiple times at our community. We do check their temperature multiple times a day, so that's already being implemented. So,
And so that's really the important part, is to keep those safety procedures in
Absolutely.
order. So Tammy, thank you so much for explaining the new protocols for visiting loved ones in assisted residential communities. Thanks so much.
You're
Great
very
information.
welcome. Thank you.